don't turn towards any of these romance authors for a beach read romance if you're looking for stellar literature. It was just the perfect summer romance, and I read it in January. So I was like, sure, let's read a book that's meant for elementary schoolers. I was honestly shocked that they didn't do the dirty earlier in the book, but once they did, it was literally like there was no stopping it. BookTube, BookTok is so oversaturated. There are so many of us reader girls out there, and I love that. But I hope that I can at least be a space where it's a little bit more realistic, because I see so many of these booktubers who are reading like 20 books a month. And I started out this year on Goodreads wanting to read 15 books. So I'm doing really well on that goal so far. More realistic when I have a full-time job that I can only be reading a few books a month, not between 10 and 20 a month. So without further ado, welcome to my cute little book nook, which is just my bedroom with my bed. And I have my Goodreads pulled up right here because I actually don't have literally any of these books besides Just Friends by Haley Pham still in my room here. They're all at my parents' house where my bigger library is. So I will be popping up a picture of the book covers over here on this part of the screen so that you can see what I'm talking about. But I have my phone here with my Goodreads pulled up so that I can remember all of the books that I've read so far this year. Let's get into it. Here are my thoughts. We started off the year with an absolute banger. I read Summer Fridays by Suzanne Rendell. I've only heard a couple of booktubers talking about this one, and then watched a video earlier today from Sarah Caroli, and it is on her summer TBR. So I really hope she reads it, and I can't wait to hear what she thinks, because I loved this book so much. I still think it might be the best book I've read this year. I loved it so much. I will say, forewarning, it has kind of a cheating trope in it. The main character and her male counterpart, or male protagonist, I should say, they do cheat on their respective partners and then end up getting together. So if that's something that you do not like as a trope in books, I wouldn't recommend this. Other than that, it is set before the cell phone era in New York City, and it's just so lovable. I've never read a Suzanne Rendell book before, but I absolutely loved her writing. It really sets you right in New York City in, gosh, what was it? The 90s, or maybe, yeah, 1999, 2001, I think is kind of when the time frame of this book is. And I loved the way she encapsulated that time period before phones. I could go on and on about this book, but I don't want this video to be literally hours long. So I'm going to cut myself off, but this is probably one of the most highly recommended books I would ever recommend for somebody to read. It was just so, it was just the perfect summer romance. And I read it in January, so I didn't read it around the right time, but it is summer now, so that would be a summer book recommendation that I have for sure. The next book I read was called The Convenience Store by the Sea, and it's by Sonoko Machida. I probably completely butchered that, but it is a translation, and the translator was Bruno Navasky. And I didn't love this book. I ended up giving it 3 stars. By the way, Summer Fridays was a 5-star. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It's basically a bunch of short stories put together about a bunch of different characters, and they all center around this same convenience store. So I understood the concept. It just took me so long to get into this book, and I ended up just not loving it, and I don't really have a whole ton else to say on it. Yeah, I just didn't end up loving it, and I can't say that I would highly recommend it. Next one, this is gonna sound so dumb. I read The One and Only Family by Katherine Applegate, and I read this because I remember as a kid, I think I was in like the 3rd grade when I read The One and Only Ivan, and that book will make you sob crying. If you haven't read that book, literally what are you doing? If I was an elementary school teacher, I think it would definitely be like a read aloud to my kids. It is so heartwarming and adorable. So this is the sequel to that, I guess. And it says on Goodreads that it's number 4, so now I'm wondering if I missed a couple of chapters. But I read this one, and it was just as adorable as the first. It follows Ivan and, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his wife as they become parents to twins, and it was adorable and just as precious as it sounds. I got into a pretty big slump during this time. By the way, I gave The One and Only Family 4 stars. right around this time in February after The Convenience Store by the Sea, which honestly took me so long to get through, but I struggle so hard to DNF books. I don't know why, it just feels like a failure to me, so that's something I need to work on. It's okay to DNF. I powered through The Convenience Store by the Sea even though I wasn't loving it, and then I hit a serious slump and I just needed something fast and adorable, and so I was like, sure, let's read a book that's meant for elementary schoolers. After that, I read When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn, obviously the queen of the Bridgerton books. Now, I love Bridgerton, the TV series, and I have also read a couple of the books. I haven't read all of them, but this is number 6, which is Francesca's story. And I read this because I know that Francesca's season is going to be the next Bridgerton season that we get coming out. I am very excited for this season still. However, I know that they did a gender swap, so Michael is now Michaela. And people are having a lot of thoughts online about this, so I decided to read the book and see what I thought. I really loved this book. I will say it was very intimacy scene heavy past the halfway point. For a Julia Quinn, I was honestly shocked that they didn't do the dirty earlier in the book, but once they did, it was literally like there was no stopping it, and that was pretty much the entire back half of the book. This was a bit much, even for a Bridgerton book, and I've heard other people say that Francesca's story is one of the most intimacy-heavy books, so I sort of knew that going in, but I still loved it. I wrote a very long review on Goodreads about this one. Like, I don't know if we can see that with the lighting in here, but she's several paragraphs long, mostly because after reading this, I understand why people are upset about the gender swap in the next season of Bridgerton, because Michael's masculinity, the fact that he is a man and possesses certain qualities that Francesca's deceased husband didn't have, is such a central part of the story to me. So I'm curious and a little apprehensive about how they're going to handle that with Bridgerton, the Netflix series. Will I be watching it? 100%. Am I a little bit nervous for how it's going to go? Also, yes. Next, the second 5-star of the year was The House of My Mother, A Daughter's Quest for Freedom by Sherry Frankie. If you haven't heard anything about this book yet, I feel like you're living under a rock. I don't even know where to begin with this story. It is absolutely insane, and I remember as like a middle schooler, I think I was around 12 years old, when 8 Passengers, the YouTube channel, was very popular. I mean, they had millions of subscribers. I was definitely one of their viewers. And I remember watching some of their videos and thinking, wow, like this family's entertaining to watch, but I feel kind of bad for the kids. Specifically that video where Ruby Frankie, the mom, doesn't bring the youngest sibling, I don't even remember all their names now or anything, but she wouldn't bring the youngest sibling any food to school, even though she forgot her lunch at home and she was a child. I remember thinking that was a little bit odd, but also as a middle schooler, I just thought, wow, I'm lucky that my parents aren't as strict as they seem to be. So I didn't really think anything of it. And then obviously when news broke a couple of years ago of Ruby Frankie's arrest, all of this crazy stuff going down, I was incredibly invested in the story. And so it was about time that I read the memoir. And I found that I really love memoirs, especially about interesting people or people who have been through something completely out of the ordinary, which obviously Sherry Frankie falls under that category. So I gave this book 5 stars. I devoured it in literally 24 hours. You can see on my Goodreads, it says from March 24th to March 25th was the time period that I read this book. I could not put it down. I am so impressed with her writing. I mean, not only was this a crazy story to be able to share and talk about, but her writing just did not feel like a debut novel. And of course, it's a memoir, but it was gripping. And I would recommend this to seriously everybody because the story is crazy, but I think it's gone about in such an articulate way with her writing that it makes it 10 times better, and truly you cannot put this book down. So make sure if you pick it up, you have like 24 hours, just a whole day to pretty much devote to it because you literally will not be able to put it down. So that was my second 5-star of the year. Moving on, I feel like I've had a lot of 3-star books so far this year. Books that I liked, but I couldn't even give them the satisfaction of a 4-star because I feel like I hold my 5-star books in really high regards. They have to be like top tier, and a 4-star is just a book that I really, really liked. The next book that I read this year was The Other Side of Now by Paige Harbison. I read this because I saw Haley Pham mention it in a video. I've never actually read like a magical realism before, and I don't think I loved it. I'm seeing now in my Goodreads review that I actually said 3.5 stars. You just can't do that on Goodreads, so it looks like a 3. But because of the ending of this book, I gave it a 3.5 because I think it was wrapped up, tied up all the loose ends really nicely, and it was the ending I was looking forward to the entire time. The main thing that I'll say about this book was the stark difference between the two timelines that we're working in, the two settings that we have with magical realism here. We have Avalon, this beautiful small town, and then we have Los Angeles. And I remember reading this and feeling that difference on the page. The LA scenes felt super cold and unwelcoming, even to our FMC. She was out of place there. She's not completely herself. And then when she's in Avalon at this acting school, she is completely herself. She's happy. She doesn't have all of like the plastic surgeries and everything that she's had in her Los Angeles life. And the difference between that, I think, was really artfully done. I don't think magical realism is necessarily for me. I tend to love a story that's really realistic, that has characters that are really relatable. And I think she was hard to relate to because she's a famous actress. And maybe I liked the Avalon scenes and chapters more because she felt more relatable in those chapters. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm not being articulate about my thoughts on this book. But in a weird way, that kind of says what it needs to say because it was that forgettable. Like, I'm not going to remember this story. I'm not going to go back to it. And I liked Paige Harbison's writing, but one thing I do remember that really is a pet peeve of mine in books, and I'm going to sound super booktuber cliche when I say this, but using modern terms, like bringing up Instagram and bringing up famous actors and actresses by their name in our time, bringing up TikTok or social media trends or buzzwords, that gets me so bad. I don't want to read about that. I don't want to be sucked into that world when I'm reading a book. Like, I'm reading a physical book in my hands to try to escape the worlds of social media, not to be pulled back into them by the language used in the books, if that makes sense. So that's my piece on that. It wasn't bad, but I also wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Moving on, we have another 5-star read of this year, and it's Fourth Wing. It's Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I loved this more than I ever expected I would. To be honest, I haven't read a fantasy since like Fablehaven in middle school, which is still one of my favorite series of all times. Shout out all of our Fablehaven lovers. I love that series so much. But I haven't really delved into fantasy. I just know it's been so popular online, so I've almost been staying away from it, wondering if I would like it or not. I am obsessed with Fourth Wing. I fully understand the hype. I fully understand why we love Xaden, why he is absolutely #1 book boyfriend, why he's perfect. I understand why we love Rebecca Yarros. I was less impressed with, I suppose, the structure of like her sentences, as much as I was impressed with the entire story arc she was able to create. I mean, we're drawing back on things from the very beginning of the book in the final battle scene of this book. And the world that she creates is just so fun to live in that I remember I actually loaned this book from a friend of mine. And I remember when I finished it, I didn't have the second one, which is now sitting over there, Iron Flame. I didn't have the second one yet, and I remember feeling genuinely sad for a couple of weeks before I found a time to meet up with her and get the second book, that I couldn't jump back into that fantasy world. The world is just one that you want to stay in and live in and get to know these characters so much, and even the side characters I feel like are fleshed out really well. And overall, all I have to say on this is hop on the train. I was late to the trend. Hop on it as soon as possible, especially before the next book in the series comes out this year, I believe. I have yet to finish book 2 and book 3. I was a little bit kind of even overwhelmed with how big this world was and how we're learning all of the politics and everything, because you have to remember I'm a romance girly at heart. I'm used to reading books like the Bridgerton books or Emily Henry books or Catherine Center books, which I have my own full thoughts on all of those romance books. But romantasy fantasy is a genre that I have not gotten into yet, so I think I was a little bit overwhelmed with this first one to the point where I haven't even been able to jump into the second one yet. And yes, I want to get back into the world, but this book is like 600 pages, and frankly, I'm quite intimidated. So that's kind of what we're working with, but I absolutely love the first one, and that was another 5-star read of my year. The next book I read was Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This is another memoir that I picked up honestly because I realized how much I loved memoirs again after I read Sherry Frankie's memoir, and this one was another 3.5 stars to me. And I think partially it was because in the beginning of this book, I remember being so confused because it's not chronological at all. She jumps around so much talking about different relationships and different places she lived, different friends that she had, different friends who were married at points in the book and then weren't by the next chapter. And I'm sure to her it makes perfect sense because it's her life and she can keep all of these converging timelines clear in her head. But to a reader, I got so lost in the first part of the book. And then I devoured the entire second half of the book in like one day. And so it's definitely bingeable. It's a fast-paced, easy read. I just had a hard time getting into it. Also think that Dolly Alderton as a narrator lived an absolutely wild life. It sounds like she had so much fun. And she's just human. She's very real and raw, but also many of the things that she was talking about were very far-fetched for me. I've never been a part of party culture like she was or lived in an off-campus apartment with a bunch of girls and their boyfriends and that kind of thing. She has so many lived experiences that I couldn't relate to at all. And you should see that by the cover of this book being crossed off like parties, boys, dates, whatever it says. That sort of gives you an insight right away into what the book is going to talk about. She also lived in the UK, which I think makes things very different than how they are in America, and maybe that made it less relatable to me as well. But overall, it was okay. It was nothing that I would necessarily reread or recommend, but 3.5 stars nonetheless. In the beginning of this month, I read a 4-star book, another one I was late to the train on, Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I don't know how it's taken me this long to read that book. I've had it in my stack for a while, but I just hadn't gotten around to it yet. And I really loved this book. I think the imagery was absolutely gorgeous. I think I'm a real sucker for crime and courtroom drama kind of vibes, so I really loved that as well in kind of the back third of this book where she's actually on trial for the murder. I also think this book and this author parsed through some really heavy themes of the time period where it's set. I mean, we're talking about prejudice and racism and how pushed out she was by the town just for being the quote-unquote marsh girl. And I think that's all parsed through really beautifully in this book. Again, if I was a teacher, man, this would totally be a read aloud for me. I think you could do such a good book study on this. I think you can do some really deep diving into those themes. And I feel like I could write like 10 essays on this book, as well as just the imagery, making the marsh itself a character. I will say I also watched the movie pretty much directly after I finished the book. And I thought it was a really good movie adaptation, and that also feels rare to find. So I didn't really know what to think going into this movie. I loved Tate just as much in the movie as I loved him in the book. He is such a perfect book and movie boyfriend. I think he's perfect. I hated Chase Andrews just as much as I did in the movie as I did in the book. I think the casting was so perfect. And I mean, what's her name? Daisy Edgar Jones. Exactly how I pictured Kaya in my head while I was reading this book. So props to the casting. I think that really helped this movie, book to movie adaptation as well. But overall, I really loved both. I'm not remembering honestly why I didn't give it 5 stars. I think again, I just hold my 5 stars in such a high regard. Like, did I love Where the Crawdads Sing? Yes. Is it on the same plane in my brain as Fourth Wing? Absolutely not. So that's where I was at with this one. The last one, and the only physical one that I have here in this library with me, is Just Friends by Haley Pham. I don't really know where to begin with this one. Let's start by saying I rated it 3 stars. Solid 3. Not a 2.5, not a 3.5. This is a 3-star book. People have had so many opinions online about this one that, again, I feel like I'm just entering my thoughts into a very oversaturated market, and even more so with this book. Like many people who I think picked this book up, I picked it up because I love Haley Pham as a YouTuber. I also love her husband. Ryan Trahan's videos are so entertaining and fun, and I would love to support them in any way. And so my mom and I both got copies of this book, and we read it together, and we had very similar thoughts on it. To me, this was adorable. I mean, it was so cute. You love the characters, but it just wasn't anything groundbreaking. I mean, it's a love story. You can tell that Haley has drawn influences from all of these authors that she really loves in order to write her own book. And can we really fault her for that? Because if I were to go write my own romance book right now, which I would love to do someday, I would also probably be taking inspiration from these incredible authors that I know and love their writing. So I don't think she's at fault for that. I just will say that I think she has some of her own voice finding to do before her next novel, which I know she's writing a next book, which I'm very excited for. And will I read it? 100%. I want to see the growth. I want to see how she evolves as an author. And I think this book proves that she can do it, and that she has the ability to write a really fun, cute, lighthearted beach read kind of romance. I just wanted there to be something groundbreaking. And I think with this plot, she was hoping that the grief would be the groundbreaking or original part of this. And I liked the way that she parsed through themes of grief. I mean, our main character loses somebody very close to her in her family. Her great aunt passes away, which is obviously a huge turn in her life. But that's also not something that we haven't really seen or read about before. Lots of main characters end up losing somebody close to them in a book, and then that affects the way they love themselves and the way they love other people and view relationships with other people. That's just nothing I feel like I haven't read before. That's the reason that this was 3 stars to me. I also don't think the writing itself was as good as it could be. No hate to her, no hate to her editors. Once again, this is a debut novel, and I think we're all judging this so harshly because we know and love Haley as a person. If this was any other author's debut novel, number 1, I don't think it would have sold as many copies. Number 2, people wouldn't be judging it as harshly as they are. I don't know what else I can say about it other than I just don't think it was groundbreaking, and it's nothing I feel like I would reread. I think it was a good one-time beach read, but that's also how I feel about books like The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I didn't think the writing of that book was particularly fantastic either, but was I able to read it on one plane flight in one sitting? Yes. Will I ever read it again? No. So if you're looking for a quick summer beach read, something cute and lighthearted that you know is going to have a happy ending, you know you're going to love the main male character because he's perfect and basically has no flaws, then this is the perfect book for you. And I would recommend it to somebody who's looking for something like that. If you're looking for groundbreaking literature, no. But also don't turn towards any of these romance authors for a beach read romance if you're looking for stellar literature. And that's what I have to say on that. So that concludes all of the books that I have read this year so far. And I hope that this was not too long of a video. I hope that it was realistic and that I had some thoughts and maybe some recommendations for you as well. And I'm really excited about some books that I have that I can see up on my shelf up there that I cannot wait to get to. I'm definitely going to be continuing with the Empyrean series because of how much I loved Fourth Wing. Obviously, we have Anatomy of an Alibi, which I'm really, really loving so far and am probably going to finish once I stop filming this video. The Correspondent is another one I feel like I'm on the late train to, but it's one I'm definitely going to read really soon. I've heard really great things about it. And also Remarkably Bright Creatures. How have I not read that yet? I know that the Netflix movie just came out and I am so beyond excited about it because it looks so cute, but I'm forcing myself to read the book first. So those are some ones that we'll have coming up that you'll definitely see in my end of year reading wrap up. But I think that's going to do it for me for right now. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I'll see you in the next one.